Welcome, fellow cinephiles, to our first ever episode. This week we will be reviewing and discussing the recent controversy surrounding Captain Marvel. So, pop some corn, grab a soda, and take a seat. You're now listening to The Casual Cinema. Alright, everybody, welcome back. It's Josh here. Of course, I'm with my partner in crime, Nathan. Say hi, Nathan.
Howdy.
And today, as you heard by the intro, we're going to be talking about Captain Marvel and all the controversies surrounding the movie, which seems to kind of be getting a little bit out of hand, it would seem. Media's kind of been consumed by it at the moment. Social media is just overrun with various comments from both genders, various political groups, just everybody's talking about it. So we thought we'd give our 2 cents on it today. But first, we wanted to actually start off by talking about the movie itself and whether or not it's any good. Because, well, I kind of feel like that's the reason for why you go and watch a movie, is whether or not it's good. So with that in mind, let's get started. I thought I'd throw things over to Nathan first by giving him, or I should say giving us, his thoughts on how good the movie was. So just general thoughts, Nathan. What did you think of the movie? Go.
Okay, hello, it's me. I'm here. Okay, I'm gonna start off by saying I enjoyed it.
Yep,
Now,
sounds pretty good.
I haven't really seen any reviews or anything, but except for a couple. But I noticed a lot of people are saying it's a boring movie, and I'll say I do agree. At times I was bored, and I was waiting for things to pick up, but I think it did.
Yeah.
And I thought it was funny, but that humor kind of felt out of place because at the start it made out like it was going to be a more serious movie. So then when they started
I
cracking
agree.
jokes more casually, especially that first fight scene when she's fighting the aliens and and it screams in her face, and then she goes like back in its face. I thought that was really weird.
Yeah, I completely
Like I didn't laugh. I
understand,
just
yeah.
kind of went, "Oh, why did she do that?" Yeah.
No, I get you. I feel kind of the same way. Obviously, we're not going to get into any kind of spoiler territory here. Try and keep it on the down low as best for any of our listeners out there who haven't seen the movie. So Nathan and I would probably try our best to not give you any kind of ideas of the plot or any specific scenes, but obviously we've got to talk about certain things. So
Okay, you could have told me that before we started.
I'm sorry. Anyway, it's okay. We'll work around it.
Spoiler-free review except for that scene.
That one scene. Look, in terms of how I felt about the movie, look, I thought that overall it was a lot better than what a lot, as you said, reviewers are kind of giving it at the moment. I think that, I don't know if it's expectation, I don't know if it's just some of the comments that Brie Larson has made that people have kind of taken offense to. I don't know if that's kind of influenced reviewers or if there's just something going on now where everyone thinks that Marvel movies have to be of this amazing quality, which some of them aren't. So I feel like the movie as a whole for me was really good. It doesn't mean it's great, doesn't mean it's amazing, and it was by no means a perfect movie, but it was a really good movie, and I had a good time with it. And for someone that went in with pretty low expectations, which I think both Nathan and I, maybe not low expectations, but the trailers weren't really doing anything for us.
I think we did have low expectations because I was not impressed by those initial trailers. I don't think it looked like a good movie. It looked meh.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was surprised. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. I was definitely surprised. Well, now that we've kind of gotten out of the way of general thoughts, let's probably try and get into the nitty-gritty. So, without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Nathan. The first thing we're going to be talking first.
I like I mentioned earlier, the tone for me was a bit confusing. Like I didn't.
Yeah.
I found it hard to I didn't understand what they were trying to do with the movie. Because at times it tried to be really serious and tried to be funny. I mean, we see a lot of that in Guardians as well, I suppose. But
yeah,
that's definitely trying to be a funny movie.
Yeah, I can kind of get you. Yeah, I think Guardians is definitely going for that comedy look. But would you say it's no different to Black Panther then, or do you think Black Panther had a better tone?
Well, Black Panther was probably a bit more serious than this movie, right?
Well, I think there were moments where they were kind of on the same pedestal for me. I mean, I think the way that this movie spoke to me is the same way that Black Panther did, which it wasn't trying to aim for the joke. It was just trying to portray the characters who necessarily were comedic, and the serious characters were serious, and I felt that that's the way
But
that this movie did it.
I think that's the problem because they're trying to. And it's almost like Captain Marvel isn't a serious character. Sorry, is a serious character, but then at times, she's like goofing around, and
Yeah,
that's what I find confusing, because Doctor Strange is also a more serious character, and that's why I think the jokes in that movie as well also fell short and kind of flopped for
yeah,
me.
I agree. I mean, if we're talking about jokes specifically, I kind of felt that this movie had better jokes than what Doctor Strange did,
Oh no, yeah, 100%.
because
I
I
mean, I
don't,
was laughing.
yeah.
I found the movie funny, and I know like a lot of the comedy came from Nick Fury, but
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that I don't even want to
yeah,
get started on the Beyonce jokes in Doctor Strange, but I just felt,
it's terrible.
but
Oh, God.
I felt that the jokes in this were definitely way better, and I felt like the movie wasn't necessarily racing to tell a joke, like it was just more like what felt natural to tell a joke. But that doesn't mean that every joke hit, like you said, and I think that tonally that might confuse people, but I think for the most part, whatever jokes there were, there's a 50-50 shot necessarily whether or not they're going to hit. And I feel like in this case, most of them hit, but some of them, even if they weren't good or didn't hit, kind of just fell under the radar. So they weren't too bad, I don't think.
I just feel like Marvel, they like feel like they have to put jokes in. They kind of,
Well,
I don't know,
yeah, I think that
and they always
that's.
have like similar style jokes too.
Well, I guess that's the whole, initial distinction between DC and Marvel was that DC was the more serious one, and now Marvel probably feels like that since it's added so much humor into its films that it has to maintain that same level of humor. But I don't know. I felt that again, when you find that right balance and you have the humor with the seriousness, that it works. And I think in this case, for the most part, for me anyway, I didn't feel that necessarily the tone was necessarily all over the place, but perhaps the plot was kind of all over the place, or the scenes themselves were all over the place. Because the way I felt was that perhaps if the story was clear, then the information we were being presented with was being presented in such a way that was kind of confusing. Um, I guess that's kind of confusing to say anyway, but
Are you talking about like with the flashbacks and everything? Because I
yeah.
thought it was, yeah, I thought it was a tad confusing as well.
And I felt like the way that they were picking and choosing which scenes to flashback to was a bit like, well, I can see why you're giving me this scene or why I'm seeing this scene, but I'd rather be seeing perhaps more of this or more of this aspect rather than something that might otherwise be kind of superfluous to the plot. Again, I don't want to get into spoilers because I know that there's listeners out there who might not have actually seen it, but I don't know, it's kind of one of those things where if you're going to have a flashback, you always want to make sure that the flashback is actually needed and that it's not just something that's just kind of padding in the runtime, if that makes any sense.
I mean, the whole amnesia thing's cliche to begin with, and that probably annoyed people as well.
Yeah, I kind of get that. But, anyway, what was next on the list, by the way?
Yeah, we can move on from
Yeah.
that. I thought the special effects were really good. I thought they looked a bit weird in the trailer, but when I watched the movie, I thought they were excellent. The review I did see, they said that the special effects were like bad or like average. I thought they were great, especially like the spaceships and stuff. I thought they looked really good, and I like the look of her powers as well.
Yeah, I didn't have an issue with the special effects in any kind of way, but that's not to say that they were bad or especially amazing for me. I mean, um, they were just what they were, which is the kind of thing that you expect from a Marvel movie at this point. But what I will say is that Captain Marvel's another great example of Marvel's track record when it comes to animating someone's face, because it seems that from Thanos, who looks almost like lifelike or human, when you come to see Samuel L. Jackson and how de-aged they made him, it seems seamless. And from what I'm aware
Well,
of, none of
actually,
that.
that is something I wanted to talk about as well.
Yeah,
Because, yes, Samuel L. Jackson looked great. Agent Coulson, on the other hand, looked really weird. He looked really bad. So, I was saying the effects were good, but that's probably the one effect I didn't like.
yeah. I mean, for people who are going to go see the movie, I will say that in terms of like de-aging, Agent Coulson and you can tell the reason why it doesn't work is because he kind of looks a bit. His skin's glossy and
Yeah,
it's
it's weird.
shiny, And when you look at Sam Jackson, it just doesn't have that same gloss and shine to it. So it just kind of looks a bit. Obviously, Sam Jackson looks better, but Coulson just looks weird.
He looks like an alien.
And the hair just.
Even,
it's just
even,
like, what?
Yeah, it just doesn't look right, does it? Yeah, no, I don't know. I mean, maybe because he wasn't in the movies much, they didn't spend as much time on the effect, probably. I don't know.
Yeah, and it doesn't really. I guess it's just one of those things that doesn't make much sense because when you look at, say, the villain of the movie, Talos, played by Ben Mendelsohn, who, in my opinion, pretty much stole the film, um, obviously he's got makeup on, but the makeup looks so damn good. And it's one of those odd things where in other Marvel movies they resort to, perhaps CGI to use motion capture on someone's face, but then you look at someone like Talos and they've used really, really, really good makeup, and it just looks way better than Coulson, and it's just one of those instances where I guess the real thing is definitely better than the CGI equivalent.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He looks more alien than the aliens.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah, he does. Just doesn't look right at all.
Yeah, but
creepy.
Yeah, but other than that, if you're going into this movie, if you've seen any other reviews and they're saying the effects are bad, I mean, I can't really speak for other reviewers, but I will say that the effects were just fine for me. I mean, they were fine. There was no issues. I thought Sam Jackson looked great. Obviously, Coulson's probably the only thing that was a bit weird, but everything else was fine.
Yeah, I mainly just thought the spaceships looked really good for me, and I really liked her powers, the effects of that.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't? I mean, she's got pretty cool powers.
Yeah, so...
I was going to say, what's next, if there's anything else you want to speak about?
I think the costumes looked good. All the costume design was fantastic as well.
I mean, for me, it was just a matter of the costumes were the 90s and they looked exactly like they would have done in the 90s. So, yeah, again, no issues. I thought all the Skrulls, which you see in the trailers, looked pretty cool. All the Kree and which is, again, you see in the trailers, so no spoilers. All of the battle suits look really cool.
Yeah, it's kind of cheesy, but that's kind of what makes it cool, right? It's like,
yeah, well, I mean, I guess if you look at Guardians, one of the coolest aspects besides the makeup and the music and all the various things that make Guardians so good is the costumes. And I think, again, this is another example of everything that's cosmic looks authentic and looks really cool and just looks colourful, which I guess is what makes them stand out from other Marvel movies in a way. But yeah, again, costumes fine, no issues for me. For me anyway.
I thought for me, I didn't notice the music, so I assume it did its job and it fit well, but there were no standout tracks for me, and nothing felt out of place.
Yeah, I mean,
in Suicide Squad. That's pretty bad music.
Well, I will say that
editing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I will say that nothing was as bad as Suicide Squad in terms of songs that were just thrown in for the purpose of just being thrown in to add a little bit of color. Like, nothing was like that, though. I will say that the movie does pander a lot to the 90s in its soundtrack, which isn't a bad thing, but I think that maybe song choice was something that they really should have considered, because I think maybe there was just one or two moments where the songs themselves were just kind of like, okay, I know you're going for that 90s tone, and I understand that you want to use a soundtrack that is an example of the 90s, but you don't necessarily need to beat me over the head with something that's such an obvious choice that I'm like, oh, well, okay, yeah, I kind of get that.
Yeah, well, I was mainly talking about the score, like the original.
Oh, yeah, that's something, again, it's one of those things where it's not that they're throwing songs in, but it blends into the background to the point where you're not concerned about it. That's how I felt. I was just
which means it does its job, right?
Yeah.
If you know, so.
No worries.
It's not Star Wars.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
Anyway, what's next?
No, I don't have much else to say. What I did notice, although I did enjoy the movie, like I said, there were some boring parts in there for me. Like, it kind of went up and down. And I feel like if I watched it a second time, which I feel like I should have, I think I would have found it... I think I will find it boring, like, more than I did the first time. Because that happened to me with Doctor Strange. So, yeah, when I first watched Doctor Strange, I thought that was a fantastic movie. Especially the special effects in that are incredible. And then I tried to rewatch it. I'm like, oh man, this is a pretty boring movie, and I found it really hard to watch a second time.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there are Marvel movies where that does occur. I think Doctor Strange, for me alone, is more of an example of where I look at that movie and go, "Oh, that looks really cool," but then visually, you can't deny that a lot of it's been done before. I mean, I'm not obviously drawing attention to Inception, and I don't want to stay on Doctor Strange for too long, but I get where you're coming from, where the second act especially slows down and you're kind of waiting until that third act where things kind of pick up again, and usually you're often surprised by that. And I think in this case it was another example. For me, this movie almost is on par with Doctor Strange. I mean, I want to say it's a little bit better, but it's almost on par in regards to its acts and its structure, because I find that the first act of the movie is quite good. The third act of the movie is quite good, if not a little abrupt in how quickly everything's resolved. But the middle act of this movie does slow down a lot, and obviously the plot is developing. Again, drawing that comparison to Doctor Strange, again, plot's developing, things are moving along, but you might find yourself kind of getting a bit bored or even tired at this point because just things aren't moving fast enough. I think that was my major critique of the movie. It was just kind of, there were times where I was like in the second act going, okay, all right, I just want to get to that third act. I just want to see what's going to happen when we get here. Though there is no spoilers, of course. Something that happens, I'd say, towards the end of the second act where things get changed up a little bit. A little bit of a twist, as you can expect in most movies. There's a little bit of a twist. And the twist, to me, was actually a really good surprise and a pleasant one. And I really liked
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I like the twist as well. Yeah.
Because of my knowledge of the comics, I'm not massively versed, but I had a preconceived notion of who certain people were, and going into it, I kind of thought that that's what was going to happen, and what actually happened was really surprising, and I was kind of taken aback by it and kind of thought, wow, that was actually really smart of them to do that because it layered it a little bit more. It wasn't just something simple. It was kind of a little bit smarter than that. But yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those things where you've got to highlight amidst a very, very boring, if not slow, at least, second act.
Mm.
Um, Outside of that, for me, I mean, as I said, I enjoyed the first act of the movie. We're talking, I guess, on at this point about the negatives of the movie, or at least what we thought were the negatives. So for me, the first act was good. I liked a lot of the stuff I saw. As I said, you do wonder why certain scenes are being used as flashbacks. So there are moments where I was like, I don't know if I need to see that. I would have liked to have seen something else. So it's kind of hard to tell you guys in detail what those are because some of you might not have seen it. um, but then, no matter what, the third act for me was just so well done, and I really liked the imagination and the creativity going on in that third act. Again, I do feel that once it hits a certain point, it does kind of end a little abruptly, and it's just kind of like, and we're done. And I was a bit like, oh, okay, well, I hoped that was a bit more drawn out. But I guess you can't go too over the top. I mean, it is just the first movie with Captain Marvel, and I guess expectation would have us, after Infinity War, expect something massively epic. And when you get something that isn't as epic as that, you kind of have to remember, hey, it's a standalone movie, take it a bit easy. But, nah, for me,
Well, to just add to
yeah.
that, yeah, I definitely just go in and just watch the movie as its own movie, but afterwards, of course, you're going to compare it to the other Marvel movies, just naturally, right? And so I do have to say, although I enjoyed it, I don't think it's as good as most of the other origin films in the cinematic universe.
Yeah, look, I mean, I completely agree with you, yeah.
Especially recent ones, like I think Homecoming was a lot better. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. I mean, if I'm being completely honest with you and our viewers out there, I should say our listeners, for me, if I was comparing this to other origin movies in terms of the MCU, this is a middle ground origin movie for me. This is kind of like, this isn't the worst origin movie in the MCU. This isn't the best origin movie in the MCU. It just fits right in the middle. For me, it's better slightly than, say, a Doctor Strange. I actually think it's a little bit better than Doctor Strange by about a tiny little bit. Um, but it's definitely not a Spider-Man Homecoming or nowhere near a Black Panther or even an Ant-Man, the first Ant-Man.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. I think Ant-Man and Guardians are just better origin movies than this,
Yeah,
and I think they're kind of similar in what they're going for. So
but if you're looking at other movies, for example, is it better than the first Thor? Yes. Is it better than the Incredible Hulk? Yes. Is it better than? Oh, I'm trying to think of other ones. Captain America: The First Avenger. Oh, yeah, that's a difficult one. I mean, maybe.
yeah, it's hard to
I'd
say.
say. I mean, for me anyway, though, it was better than Doctor Strange, and I think the reason why was because for my experience anyway, when I've gone back like you and rewatched Doctor Strange, it definitely doesn't have the same impact that it once did. Um,
Yeah, and the reason why I keep bringing it on, we're going on about this so much, is because people are saying this is the worst Marvel movie ever made, and I think that's absolute bullshit. Because even someone said that Thor: The Dark World is better than this movie. That's like, no,
yeah,
it's not. No
it's
way.
a
That's easily the worst Marvel movie, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a
I
perfect
don't know.
way to segue into, I guess, the controversy surrounding this movie. I mean, we'd still give I guess, our final scores at the end, but to give you guys a bit of an idea of what's going on, it seems that the media and general reviewers or everybody's just been torn on this film, and it's one of the most perplexing things I've ever seen when it comes to just social media, when it comes to YouTube, when it comes to just TV and media in general. I've never seen something so divisive, and I mean, this is somebody coming from somebody who does not like the Last Jedi. Um, but can it,
Right, we're not here to talk
I
about
don't.
that.
We're
I'll
not going
save
to
that
talk.
for a future episode.
We're not
That's
going to talk about it here. But what I do want to get into is the fact that for me, The Last Jedi might not be a movie that I particularly think is good, but I don't think it's a bad movie. And when it comes to a movie like this, I actually think it's a really good movie. And I see all this hate being directed at it, and I think that initially we go to a place of, well, where's this all coming from? Obviously, maybe this has got something to do with the fact that Captain Marvel's a woman. And to be completely honest, I think that that's a very small part of this, and that something else is going on in terms of expectation, which is kind of either proving to be detrimental or, I guess you could say, positive, for any moviegoer out there. I don't know. What do you think, Nathan?
I don't think it. Like, it had so much like pre-hate as well before the movie was even released, and I think it does have a lot to do with that it's a female lead, which I don't know why. That's so weird. And also, I notice a lot of people are comparing it to Wonder Woman because obviously that DC did it first. They have a female lead
Yeah, you have to
superhero
have the
movie,
natural
but
comparison. Yeah.
but I'm so upset that there is only two female-led superhero movies, and obviously you're going to compare them. There should be so many more, and I think Marvel should have done one a lot sooner. And I think also that's why, because they've released this movie so late in the cinematic universe. Like, oh, of course they have to chuck in a female character now. Like, I get what people come from and why they think there's a political agenda behind it. I don't believe that. Obviously it's going to be targeted towards females and little girls, and there's nothing wrong with that because young boys have so many heroes to look up to. There's so many movies,
Well, that's the.
so many comics.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Like,
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely beautiful that like little girls have a hero to look up to. That's great.
Yeah.
I don't see what the problem is.
Of course, more power to them. I mean, it's one of those things where I completely agree with you that there should be more female-led superhero movies, and why it's taken this long for Marvel to actually make one, surprises me, especially when even if you just look at the Avengers, besides Black Widow, the fact that Wasp was an original member of the Avengers, but it took how long? About 10 years before they, actually put her into the title of a movie and put her in a role that was center stage next to Ant-Man. Now, if I'm going to get away from the terms of the equality argument, you could also argue that, Marvel have to think about profits like any kind of company, and they have to think about who's going to make the biggest pile of cash at the end of the day. And obviously they want to bring out the big names first, like Captain America, like Thor, like the Hulk, and like Iron Man, hence why they brought them out first. Again, they're not necessarily A-list superheroes like, say, the X-Men or Spider-Man. but the way that they portrayed them and the way that they presented them definitely garnered a lot of praise. I guess what I'm getting into here is the argument of where the expectation for this movie came from, and kind of where the positive expectation came from, which was that Marvel's got this track record, especially recently, of making very good and very fun comedic, even I was going to say even comedic movies. And I think that this movie kind of differs from that formula just a little bit, in a way that kind of harkens back to MCU Phase 1, or even MCU early Phase 2, perhaps before Winter Soldier. You're kind of getting into that stage of a formula that's, I guess, tried and true, but still they're trying to mix it up. I'm just trying to find my train of thought here, but it's that idea of the expectation behind this movie was that we have a female-led superhero for the first time in the MCU. And with that came those highly anticipating it and wanting this to be the next Black Panther and wanting this to be the next Infinity War. But when you come after two heavy hitters like Black Panther and Infinity War, you kind of have to step back a little bit and think, okay, this movie might not be as good as that. And I think the trailers really informed us that it might not have been as good as that. And I think that if you're going into this movie, thinking that it has to be as good as Black Panther or it has to be as good as Infinity War, and you're kind of giving a pass on the trailers, I think that you should look a little bit more carefully, because if you just go on into it, based on the trailers, you're going to be surprised. But if you go in with such high expectations that it's going to be amazing, then obviously you're going to be disappointed. And I think that I speak for Nathan and I when we both of us have gone into movies before expecting the most amazing thing we're ever going to see. And when we don't get that, we're probably disappointed, we're probably angry about it, and we're probably going to be very harsh on a movie. But give it a second viewing.
Yeah, well, in saying as well, I mean, I think you're a lot more critical than I am. And I see myself as more of a casual viewer of things. And I'm actually very surprised how much you enjoyed this movie. It almost sounds like you enjoyed it more than I did, which I think's really weird given our track record.
Yeah, well,
but
that's the thing. I don't know what it was. As we said earlier, I mean, I went into this movie with a very kind of just medium. I was thinking it's going to be mediocre, probably, or at least good, right? Because
same. I just thought,
in my opinion, Marvel, at least in the MCU, have not done a bad movie. They've done mediocre movies, perhaps boring movies, but they've never done oh my god, this is awful kind of movie, right? And because of that, I kind of knew no matter what, I was going to get at least a mediocre to good movie. And what I got was a very good movie. As I said at the start, not a great movie, not an amazing movie, and not a movie without faults. But a movie that, as a Marvel fan, if you just go in knowing from the trailers what this movie could be like, and even without the trailers, if you go in liking Marvel, you might just like the movie, I feel like if you don't like it, that's okay. If you do like it, all the power to you. But again, I thought it was really good, and I just don't understand a lot of the hate. And I think that bad expectation, which I guess if I've been talking about the positive, the negative expectation, would be to point figures and to say that, oh, well, it's a female-led movie, she's a woman, that's the problem. Well, why wasn't this hate being aimed at Wonder Woman?
It seems like a lot of people have a problem with the actor, saying that she's not good, doesn't have good facial expressions, and just isn't fit for the role, whereas Wonder Woman's kind of the perfect casting in the eyes of people. But I thought Brie Larson did a fantastic job. So I think
to me she was Captain Marvel, right? From what?
Yeah, well, I don't know too much about the character, but just going in watching the movie, she was fine.
From what?
I don't know. I didn't have a problem with the acting.
From what I knew of the character going in, that she was a pretty stoic, warrior type woman who didn't necessarily crack jokes as much as an Iron Man or a Star-Lord or a Spider-Man, and was more...
That's what I was trying to say before. I think maybe they should have just made her a more serious character. I know she's not behind most of the jokes, but at some some points in the movie she's like really goofy,
Yeah.
and I don't think I like that. I think they should have just left the jokes to young Nick Fury, who they made goofier than older Nick Fury, which is good, right? It's fun. It's something different. And so maybe they should have just stuck with that, like, leaving the comedic relief to the other characters in the film and making her more serious throughout instead of doing the whole mixed thing, which always seems Marvel struggle with, and that's where they always muck up on a lot of the characters.
Yeah, well, I feel it's that issue, isn't it? They kind of hit that roadblock a lot of the time. As we've mentioned earlier, I think Guardians is another example. I think that Volume 2 and even Ant-Man and the Wasp is one of those things where they try to do comedy so much at the expense of the characters, to the point where you have a character who may have been serious in a previous movie, and then they are throwing jokes at that person, and you're kind of sitting there going, but hang on a minute, that's not what he was or she was like in the last movie. Why are they like that now? And I think that this is on a much smaller scale because it's just one movie, but you have the case with Captain Marvel where you have a character who perhaps you want a little bit of something different and something that's a bit more serious, and you get that at times a lot, but then she's cracking the jokes, and it's just kind of like, okay.
It's odd.
Yeah, it's odd.
It's odd.
It's not. It's not something that pulls you out of the movie. It's not something that necessarily is bad. It's just something that doesn't work sometimes. But never did I think, back on the topic of jokes, that what jokes were there were like bad or just awful or cringy. Nothing was cringy to me, and that's the best thing I can say is nothing was cringy.
Yeah, that's true. Marvel are pretty famous for the cringy jokes. I didn't find anything cringy. No, just that screaming thing was weird.
Yeah. And as I said, the highlight for me, besides Sam Jackson, and even the chemistry between him and Brie Larson, which we haven't even talked about, was kind of this buddy cop thing they had going, which was actually pretty. I actually enjoyed that. I don't know.
Speaking about Nick Fury as well, I wish there were more scenes with Coulson as well.
Yeah.
Coulson and Nick Fury. I really want to see that buddy cop combo, and I think I saw a few comments. I think a lot of people wanted that too, because Coulson's a beloved character, which is weird because he's not really in the cinematic universe for long, but then he went on to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and yeah, I guess he just really grew on people. And I'm a fan of Coulson. I was really excited that he was back in this movie.
Yeah.
And they just kind of shafted him to the side to the point where did they even really need to put him in the movie?
Well, I think speaking on that, I think we brought up a great topic, which is that had they gotten rid of, say, two characters, they're in the trailers, so don't worry, people. Captain Marvel's kind of co-pilot or buddy friend that she reacquaints herself with when she comes back to Earth. And I guess it's fair to say it's not too much of a spoiler. I'm her daughter. I think that if they had gotten rid of those characters, focused a little bit more on Annette Bening's character, that is the, I guess you could say for people who do not know who Annette Bening is, that would be, I don't want to spoil anything, the doctor who is the head of the flight research facility that Carol kind of, I guess, flies planes for. Had they focused a little bit on their relationship, Carol and the doctor's relationship a little bit more, and
yeah, I think that was a more interesting relationship, but their friend was just kind of there.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that
point.
if they had done that a little bit more, gotten rid of the friend and replaced it with kind of, a sort of relationship as well between Nick Fury and Coulson, I think sort of maybe Coulson perhaps being a little bit more apprehensive about trusting Captain Marvel, the kind of dynamic that could have been there could have been just a little bit more interesting and a little bit more definitely something that as fans of Marvel we would have wanted to see.
Yeah, they just made Coulson so blunt in this. Like, it didn't even feel like a character. It almost just felt like a robot that was just there. I wasn't a fan of that. But yeah, But I really like what they did with Nick Fury, and yeah, the relationship between Captain Marvel and Nick Fury was really entertaining to watch.
Yeah,
sure.
And again, I can't really get into. We haven't even spoken about Goose the cat. Who you've all seen in the trailers. Goose the cat was great. But I can't. I want to get into Talos, Ben Mendelsohn's character, so much, the villainous Skrull of the movie. But I can't. But he's just so good. I thought he just stole every scene that he was in. I was so interested in him and the story that he had.
Again, again, he was a really good character because he was a serious character, but just the way he was, I guess, because he's an alien, he doesn't understand everything. That's what made him funny.
Yeah, and I guess it
And
wasn't over the top.
obviously the accent and everything.
Yeah.
But he was a naturally funny character as
Yeah.
well. Unlike Captain Marvel, where it felt a bit forced. Yeah, I think he did steal the show, and I saw a lot of people said that he was their favorite part of the movie. I don't know if it was my favorite part, but I did enjoy the performance.
Well, in my case, he was definitely my favorite part, and I know that for our listeners that we might be dwelling sometimes a bit on the negative, and I think that for me anyway, what negative was there wasn't enough to make this movie average. It wasn't enough to make this movie bad or awful because the positive stuff was just so good. Again, the movie's not perfect because no movie is, but if you're going into this thinking because of all the reviews and all the opinions you might see on social media that this is an awful movie, in my opinion, and I'm sure in Nathan's as well, this is not. And for me anyway,
Yeah, no, they did a really good job. Marvel, they just keep smashing them out and they're doing great.
yeah, I just think this movie's kind of gone down the route of the media, and even social media has taken it and done almost like a Ghostbusters 2016 with it, and kind of implied that there's some sort of bigger agenda going on here. But literally, if you just go in,
Look,
yeah,
all I want to say is just because a movie has a female lead, it doesn't mean it's a social justice movie. That's all I want to say
yeah,
about that.
and I agree, because I think that even if you look at Wonder Woman, I didn't go into Wonder Woman thinking there was some sort of social justice agenda, and I really enjoyed Wonder Woman. So I don't see what the issue is with some people, but obviously people are going and seeing this with some sort of thoughts and opinions in mind, and if those are tarnishing their experiences, then that's on them. But if you're genuinely someone who saw this movie and didn't like it, then fair enough. I guess I could understand where you're coming from. But anyway, look, I think that we've sort of put it off a bit too long, and we should probably get into we'll try and wrap it up. Kind of give our thoughts. We've obviously given so many thoughts on the movie and the kind of the controversy.
Yeah, let's start giving out
All right,
thoughts.
no more thoughts. No more thoughts. All right. So I guess I'll go to you, Nathan, first. Out of 5 stars, what would you give this movie?
All right.
What would you give Captain Marvel?
Yep, I definitely enjoyed it. It's a lot better than people have been saying. It didn't deserve the pre-hate. It doesn't deserve the post-hate. I think it was a very good movie. But, of course, it's not excellent. It's nothing spectacular, I suppose. I've also seen people saying it's their favourite Marvel movie. I definitely wouldn't go that far. So I just want to go above average and kind of stay in the middle. And I'm going to give it 3.5 stars out of 5, but not normal stars. The stars that's on Captain Marvel's uniform. Okay.
No plugs there. Anyway, look, I'm just going to echo what Nathan said by just reiterating, it's a good movie, in my opinion. Whether or not you're going to have any preconceived notions of what the movie could be and won't be, it's entirely up to you. But just go in with an open mind. That's all I'm going to say. And like me, you might be pleasantly surprised by the experience. So overall, I'm in the same boat. I'm going to give it 3.5 stars out of 5. It's not going to be breaking the genre in any kind of way. It's not going to be making waves or anything like that. But it's a serviceable, very good movie that anybody, Marvel fan or not, will enjoy. Anyway, that wraps it up for this week.
Yep. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll catch you next week. In the meantime, stay cool, and we'll see you then.
See you on the next one. Bye.